A very good afternoon, everyone joining us today. My name is Nurul and I'm from Brunei. I am pleased to be chairing this session with my colleague Lert from Cambodia. First and foremost, let us welcome the guest speakers. We have Dr. Mengku, Dr. Aziana Sungkar, and Madam Manisha. Welcome to the first industry session of the International Conference of Responsible Tourism and Hospitality. So we will have 3 guest speakers to present about community-based tourism today. So without further ado, let's start this session by introducing our first speaker for today, Dr. Mengku. Dr. Mengku is an assistant professor at the Hiroshima University Graduate School of Humanities and Social Sciences. He is also the co-convener of Small Island Cultures Research Initiative, SICRI, and a visiting research fellow at Wakayama University Center for Tourism Research. Dr. Mang, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Today, I want to talk about, from my observation in Japan's one of the largest art festival tourism case. And this case is what they called revitalization engaged tourism. But I would like to emphasize the differences between what is actually the community-based and what is the community engaged art tourism. My shared part is very simple, only 3 parts: art in the community and what art tourism can be good for further community development, and eventually art become a community. So it's related to art intervention and tourism co-creation, as well as community revitalization. So first of all, everything starts from the concept of art tourism. So art tourism, when art combined with tourism, it's hard to say we should evaluate art in tourism or evaluate tourism in art, because art is moved out of the traditional museum system. So it's become more socially engaged. In Japan's case, it's become a revitalization engaged type of tourism. So the history of art tourism can be as old as the discussion starts from Guggenheim Museum effect in the urban area, as well as the Mona effect in Tasmania, Australia, by bringing incredible amount of visitation into the non-urban center. And now our cases move to the Naoshima effect by discuss what kind of the power art festival can bring 1 million tourists a year into the very peripheral area. So, but one thing we should look at is the motivation to travel to see art is not created from the tourism industry, it's from the art world rather than tourism. So my central question today is, art can really bring community revitalization? If so, is this responsible or not? Let's carry this question and figure out together. So this is, on the left side is a map of Japan's population. Rural area will be declined 18 years later, which means the old area will extinct and no people living in this community. Is a very serious depopulation issue. On the right side, more than 100 of this rural Biennale, Triennale, and art festival start happening in Japan. And my focus is based in the Seto Uchi area. Let me zoom out this area. Seto Uchi area, also called the Seto Inland Sea area. There is a 300 habitat island in this area. So we can see during 10 years development, there are 12 islands being considered Japan's art island in this area. I also started to research this area for already 6 years and published some paper based on the art impact, tourism influence, as well as the community revitalization. But today, I would put 3 key focus. The first one is this type of art tourism and festival is very relational. It's bring regional resources exchange with global knowledge and capital. And the second thing is not just Japan, China, as well as other East Asian countries start to copy this kind of rural art festival into their context. Is this really a sustainable model we can really copy, or all art and creative development we cannot call it as a model to copy into other regions? And the third question is also the central question I want to figure out is this art island can really bring sustainability and resilience. Is this really responsible? Especially I want to talk about the differences between community-based as well as community engaged. But one thing for sure, in Japan, after 10 years development, this art festival bring new kind of a sense of place and what we call art islandness into this region. So why I focus on small rural islands? Three major considerations. First, all small island has a fragile ecological and social economy structure. It's very difficult to make change. And second, it's a peripheral rural region. We often call this kind of a region facing serious depopulation. Therefore, it's also a resource constrained environment. It's also hard to create tourism because none of those areas are developed tourism before. So when we develop tourism into this kind of area, it has a double challenge from its own issue as well as the impact from outside. Let's look at some basic data. The red area is the aging rate of those islands. We can see some islands, almost 80% of people are elderly people. So therefore, no working population, especially smaller island, has only 40 people left. Therefore, you can observe a lot of very beautiful traditional Japanese house collapsing on the island, like the photo on the left side. At the same time, we can also see the big development by a millionaire come to this area by building very avant-garde contemporary art museum, try to bring art tourists visit those islands. So therefore, after 10 years development, we can observe a lot of alienate non-local culture based this kind of art development into this region. So a very early concept start from the last century kind of land art. The artists believe that put art into this kind of rural place is really can create a heterotopian and a utopian based kind of a non-urban and non-global kind of experiences for the tourists. And also the concept site-specific art means this artwork is only create a lot of meaningful and aesthetic appearance in this specific kind of place, like this one, Yaoi Kusama's pumpkin near the dock of Naoshima. And the art also have a more community engaged feather by saying it's a socially engaged, like this artist on Ogijima, he tried to collect local people's forgotten memory and object, put them into a jar and also display in a very beautiful way. So no matter what type of art and how amazing this art can attract how many tourists, we can see after 10 years development, this region already become top 10 travel destination by Traveler Magazine and also Lonely Planet, also ranking number 7 with World Travel Destination by New York Times. Not just the tourism world, from the art world, two art museum is also selected, ranking top 100 art museum in the world. We can see Chichu Art Museum on the left side on Naoshima has a higher ranking than the Louvre from France, from Paris. So this is a very incredible power brought by this kind of art tourism development. So therefore, the literature is, I think we shouldn't limit our discussion only in the arts, only in the tourism, or only in the community development and revitalization. Therefore, everything has become relational. Art become a relational art site, and tourism become a relational co-creation and cultural exchange, and also economic opportunity, as well as the revitalization is also highly connected with the creativity as well as the tourism creation. So therefore, this research really focused on the 12 art islands development in the Southern Inland Sea area. As we also noticed, this art island also, the mechanism of it's not just created by one organization, it's created by multiple stakeholders. We call it public-private partnership. So Red Island carries the most important $3 billion investment art museum, and the Blue Island actually are considered more temporary kind of a socially engaged art type. So it's a quite complicated organization structure. What I really focus is the local business, the local and the community members. As I observe, focus on small business with tourism and also the local industry without engaging with tourism. Local people like this type of art tourism, and the local people has no interest with this kind of development. Except also focus on the organizers. I also observe there are incredible amount of commuter who only open their business on the island, but they are not live on the island. So therefore, they are not resident, but they are insiders. On the community level, also long-term action-based research by creating a local art center. We organize study tour. We also organize research trip and academic trip with scholars. A little bit connect with the creative tourism literature. As we know, art tourism are considered from production side is a high culture kind of product. And the recent art tourism development already, from consumption perspective, already turn a passive form of cultural tourism into a more active form of cultural tourism. But this type of a revitalization engaged tourism is not just purely art tourism is also trigger tourist interaction with the local everyday culture and pop culture. So therefore, it's tried to cover all kind of island art as well as the community experience into a more active form. So since the community already become an art site, so three things I want to re-emphasize is this socially engaged art really can make community revitalization, and what are the difference between community-based tourism and community-engaged tourism? And we talk about art on the island, or is art can also for the locals. So I evaluate art, tourism, and community and combine them into a very complicated conceptual framework. So from an early published paper, I try to discuss island has multiple kind of identities from historical island into like Teshima is suffered by a huge amount of 80 acres of industrial pollution. And also in the recent decade, it suffered by aging, and now the art arrived. The perception of this islandness is like an onion. It's like a different layer. We're looking at art on the island. We consider art on and art for and art as or revitalize the island in three kind of perspective. First, it's if the art bring local level creation. Second, we have to think about festival is never sustainable. How local business and community survive from this kind of festival period. And also we focus on the social interaction perspective. One previous research, we can know some islands really shows they are not just tourism business development, they also taking care of the community and play a role of local infrastructure, like the three islands on the right up corner. But some island didn't show this kind of sign. So therefore, half of the island really become a community engaged tourism development, and half of the island is only community based, but nothing changed from community level. We cannot see the co-creation. And from the observation, it did bring over tourism, and it's very difficult for local even to schedule their regular schedule to throw away the garbage, because the tourists will arrive at 9 o'clock, so all the locals have to throw away their garbage before that. And also from the landscape perspective, two type of outcome all showed between community augmentation and also kind of a creative destruction by creating a tourism place, if it's only for elite tourists from urban area, or they create a place everybody can enjoy. That's a kind of a very important way to think about this. So therefore, if there is a co-creation process on the island, there will be we can really say this is community engaged tourism. If not, it's just a community based. So comparatively speaking. And also this art festival only exists for 100 days. It's a trinale. Therefore, 3 years, there will be no trinale. How local business can survive under this kind of cycle is highly important, and it do impact the local business ecosystem as well as locals' daily life. Like in the picture, the guy is a gas station owner. Sometimes he is a gas station owner. Sometimes he become a car rental guy. So because of this festival influence. And from social interaction perspective, we can also observe this social interaction not just between tourists and residents, it also brings some new people move to the island, so therefore become new and old resident interaction, bring changes, bring creativity, business opportunity on the island. Eventually, the island is not isolated anymore, it's become a network community. So it has an island and extra island social exchange. So in conclusion, I would say the first step, what we call community-based tourism, is just art on the island. This is a top-down, this is a creative destruction, it's a development rather than revitalization. So it's a local and tourist interaction. At the second stage, if we can receive some business, they also play a role, become a community infrastructure for the community member can enjoy. So it's a bottom up, is a creative enhancement, is a more community level development rather than tourism, is a new and old resident interaction. In the bad cases, they will receive a lot of commuter and the money will not go back to the community and they are not rooted in the community as well. If community-based tourism also develop into community engaged tourism, then we can see it's a community revitalization with a circle. It's a new endogenous, it can mix with the top-down and bottom-up co-creation. It's a sustainable development. It's also multi-level interaction, become a network community. So in the last part, I just summarized what I just said into a table based on the previous literature review. We can see the center consideration if local level kind of a community type of business and community level co-creation can really happen. Therefore, the community can go to the revitalization process, at least in Japan's context. So for answering the question, if the community can reach the community engaged co-creation process, therefore, this type of development is responsible. If not, it's just a business development borrowed the local community. And thank you very much and welcome for more comments.
Thank you, Dr. Mang, for an insightful presentation about the role of creative initiatives, specifically art festivals, and promoting an engaged community-based tourism. For the next presentation, please allow my colleague to take over the session. Over to you, Lert.
Thanks, Nero, for handing the next task over to me. The next speaker for our session today is Dr. Aina. Dr. Aina is a senior lecturer at the Department of Conservation of Forest Resource and Ecotourism at IPB University, Indonesia. So Dr. Aina, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Arziana Sunkar, but as Lot said, you can call me also Ina, and I'm from the IPB University in Bogor, Indonesia. Perhaps you might wonder what does positive deviance means and what is its significance in community-based tourism. Well, first, let me talk about tourism and community. In developing countries, very often sustainable tourism take the form of community-based tourism. And this is in line with responsible tourism, where the purpose of the sustainable tourism is to enhance the life quality of the local people. And we do this by maximizing economical benefit, by protecting the nature and environment, and also providing quality experience for the visitors, because sustainable tourism depends on the sustainability of the visitors coming to the area. So we have to ensure that the tourists are satisfied, but we also have to make sure that the environment are protected, and we have to make sure that the people also get benefit from it. And in sustainable tourism, through this community participation and empowerment, the manager of the area and the government, they would gain a clearer understanding of what are the major problems faced by their community. And if they know that, then they can explore some ways to solve the problem. So whenever people conduct a community engagement program, a lot of them would usually ask when they arrive at the village, they usually ask, what are the problems faced in the village? Or what can we do to help? And what's wrong here? And if we ask these questions, we put ourselves as outsiders because we ask these questions, meaning that we don't know the answer to it. And it also puts us as an outsiders experts. By asking these questions, we're hoping that we can help the community. So usually what is done next is we try to create a situations or an atmosphere to enable the local potentials. And after that, we try to strengthen the local potential of the resources, empowering the people. So that way we empower the people, we enable them, and then hoping that they will be able to live better. And these are called the asset-based community development, or the ABCD approach, because this community development approach is based on what the locals are having, what are their potentials. So what we know is that based on various research, leadership competencies has been known to be one of the reasons for the community success in fostering the community-based tourism. Sometimes when people outside the community come to the area and they plan programs, they conduct activities, the local people become engaged with the outsiders, and it often results in dependencies. And so that's not what we want. We want them to be empowered. We want them to be able to do the activities themselves without any outsiders. While at the same, while other research also showed that bottom-up process often resulted in a more robust structures, and this just signify the important role of local champions. And in tourism, we often hear the word local champions. And these local champions are actually local people. We can often find them in local leaders, in local figures, and they must act as mediators, they must act as facilitators, and sometimes also mobilizers. And they help to facilitate the participations of local community in tourism development. But sometimes we have incompetent leaders. And if we have an incompetent leaders that lead the CBT, then the people and the activity will not be successful. And once we know that, what we usually do if we want to conduct activities for the local people and we want them to get engaged, and usually we are busy proposing and preparing programs, budgets, and also who will be the experts. And also because it has to be community-based, so as we know that it's better use the local people because they are the one who knows the local area. They are the ones who knows the local people. So we often try to find, are there any local figures? Are there any local champions? But can all of this guarantee community engagement? The engagement of the community is very important because this is the key to a successful community-based tourism. So very often we found that funding is a major constraint. It's also, but the extraordinary is when you have, when the empowerment capitalizes the community-owned resources. And this way it needs the management of human behavior. And the components in behavior change, first, the community must feel that they are that the resources that are used for the tourism are owned by them. And also these people, they don't want to wait for too much longer. They just want the immediate actions. So we have to focus on practice. And we have to remember that the local people is the expert, not us, because they are the one who live in the area, they know the area, they know the people. Challenge in community-based in finding local initiative and reproducing them for others and make the initiators as the local agent of change. So instead of us being the agent of change, it is best that we have the local people as the local agent of change. And in diffusing innovations, we have to remember that there are groups of people. The majority, the early majority and late majority are in the middle. But first, in every community, there are innovators important in community-based tourism because they are the innovators. So we have to look for these people. And this is one thing that we don't know. First, what we know is that we do know that local champions play the role, and usually the local champion is found within a local leaders or local figures. But what we don't know is that there are other individuals who has the same problems, who share the same resources, but manage to find ways to effectively address the problem. So like you see in this picture, 4 people and then 1 people with the same resources, but the 1 people, it finds a way to push this stone up the hill, whether the 4 people, they found it really tired. So we call this person up there is positive deviant, and we call the process positive deviant. And the basic principle of positive deviance is that in every community, there are certain individuals whose uncommon practices or behaviors enables them to find better solutions to the problem than their neighbors. They share the same resources. And positive deviants are important for community-based tourism because the people usually listen to their peers. If outsider or if outsider experts telling them what to do, sometimes they just say, "Oh, you don't know what, you don't have the same resources as we do. You are rich. You didn't come from the same area as we do." So if the person that engaging them in the process comes from the area and also share the same problems and also have the same resources, they are easier to listen because what they will think is that he can do it or she can do it or they can do it. Why can't I? And this positive deviant individuals are ordinarily invisible, unlike local figures or local champions. The positive deviant can be local figure, positive deviant can be local champions, but very often they are not. So they are deviants because their uncommon behaviors are not the norm in the community, and they are positive deviants because they have found ways to effectively address the problems. So when we hear the words deviance, we think it's negative, but this is positive deviance because they find better ways to address the problem. So basically, when we come to a village, before we come, we try to define the problem by ourselves. You don't ask the community, what's your problem? We ask ourselves, we study first, and then we look at the normative behavior of the community. We look at the barriers and challenges related to the problem, and then we define the desired outcome. Once we have that, we will determine these positive deviants. We have to identify individuals or groups within the community that shows the expected results. So positive deviant focuses on practice, not knowledge. So we have to look at individuals who practice, and that practice makes them better instead of the knowledge. And so we have to look for the individuals who are innovators. And then once we found them, we allow the community to discover these unusual behaviors and the practices of the positive deviance. And this will encourage other community members to do the same immediately, because they are not told to do by outsiders, but they see from themselves what their community members, the positive deviants, are doing. And we can discover this also by group discussions and also visits to positive deviant individuals or family. And then after that, we design individual groups, develop their activities based on their initiative. So we ask the positive deviants to teach the other member what he or she or they are doing right, and so that the community member could practice whatever the positive deviants are practicing. And this way, the positive deviance is the agent of change, or the local champions in this case. And step 5, the community will develop their own way to monitor the development of this new behavior, and then they will monitor the progress. And then the last step is to evaluate for us, to evaluate the positive deviance approach. So basically, the community are doing them, but we as the facilitators, we have to evaluate this positive deviance approach in that area. So what positive deviance can do to empower community? They encourage people to see, to seek, and rediscover the existing wisdom and resources and rebuild their strength. And previously, I've shown that ABCD, asset-based community development approach, and positive deviance is also an ABCD approach, but this is an asset-based community-driven approach. And this is different from the conventional empowerment approach, which tend to look more at the weaknesses of the community. So when we want to apply the positive deviance, don't look at the weakness. Never ask what are the problems, never ask what can we do, never ask what's wrong here. But what you should ask is what are the solutions that is seen in this village? What can the community do for themselves? What's right here? This way, the locals are the experts and we are the facilitators. So if you think you are going to facilitate a positive deviance, you have to prepare yourself. You have to be an active listener. You have to listen to the people, give them time to talk, give them room to talk. You ask using open-ended questions, and when they ask you a question, you answer back with a question. That way, the people will answer what they are asking themselves, so they know, basically, they know the answer. And you have to demonstrate empathy as an outsider, not as an expert, because you have to refrain from sharing expertise unless you ask. So again, the local people are the experts. So basically, when we conduct a community engagement program, like community-based tourism, we have to learn from the people. We plan with them. We begin with what they have, and we build on what they know. This is the phrase that I took from this guy, Lao Tzu. And because this way, when the task is accomplished, the people will say, we have done it ourselves. And that is community-based tourism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ina, for insightful presentation on the positive deviance in community-based tourism. Moving to the next speakers, we are pleased to have Madame Manisha with us today. And Madame Manisha is the Managing Director of Village Ways India. Madame Manisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Lord. And it was really nice to hear Dr. Meng and Dr. Ina because it was so already I think Dr. Meng and Dr. Ina have, illustrated on the importance of community involved in tourism and, how it can differentiate in different backgrounds. So going forward from there, as you mentioned that, for us, this was more a journey, practical on ground. And I think now that I can read and know more about the academic side, I understand and relate to those points. So in 2004, roughly 10 years back, I'll just give a background of how this started. So we actually were located inside a wildlife sanctuary. So this is a protected area. And you know that within a sanctuary, there are a couple of villages which were existing, and once this was declared as a sanctuary, which is in 1980, there were many rules implicated on the people living inside the forests. And therefore, from time to time, when people started having livelihood issues because they could not graze their animals freely as they would do before it was declared as a sanctuary, and people had to move out of the villages to look for work. Farms were getting impacted because of the rise in animals in the sanctuary. So even that side was getting affected as far as the livelihood is concerned. So Binsar is a very rich sanctuary, and there are over 200 bird species and other animals, including leopards. So it is certainly a nice area, beautiful region. Despite being a very nice, beautiful region and with beautiful villages also, and within the state, this Himalayan state, tourism is one of the major source of revenue. So you can imagine that in the state, actually the main earning source doesn't reach the villages. So there is no impact actually coming to the villages. So that is what we felt when we started. And it was a chance. I don't say that because we were also living within the sanctuary, and it was a chance that we were able to visit these villages regularly and were witnessing a very high out migration level each time we used to visit these villages. So the idea was that why communities are bypassed, with any benefits, though the tourists probably are coming very close to where they are, but they are still not able to reach the villages. So in order to reinforce the local economy, we thought that we should find a little model which can work with these 5 villages at that time. So, whenever you start working in a community, as very rightly pointed out by my fellow speakers today, that it is very important to first look at the dangers of tourism. I did a conference speech very recently, and one of my colleagues, he mentioned a very important point that tourism can actually be like a fire which can either burn your hand or it can cook food. So, the difference between a negative and a positive element in tourism for the community, especially those who are very sensitive and, probably in most remote places in the world, this sensitization is very, very important, that how you create something which is completely owned and run by the local community. So at that point in 2004, what we realized is that we must form a collective approach to tourism, and so that not only the income are shared, but there is also the responsibility sharing, which is most important. You have to be responsible for your area, your region, or your village to be away from negative impacts of tourism, and that we think that collective approach did that for us. So just saying that collective approach, what is it exactly? So I'll just explain it briefly. What we do in a village, or what we started doing, is that we formed a small village committee of members from each household, which had, say, at least one member from each household, so that we ensure that the participation is from everyone in the village. Now, there are people who may have another source of income and may not really directly want to get involved in the work, but that's okay, because there are also some advisory positions within the committee where people can be engaged. And women actually have a natural, I would say, a talent for hospitality, and so therefore, but equally, since tourism has also come with a lot of perceptions, because a lot of people are concerned about the impact. So they generally at the first go may not really feel comfortable to involve their women members. What we try to do is have a fixed percentage of women right from the start, so that and whatever we've seen till now in the 16 years is that then generally it starts with a small number, but it generally increases as the community starts trusting the whole model and the guests who are visiting the villages. The other thing is about the ownership, because I think Dr. Ina mentioned about the ownership. I mean, it's completely correct that in our area also what we were observing is that people from outside coming and buying land and then building their own hotels or resorts, but local people were losing their own land. So the first focus had to be that the land, whoever is owner is not using it for farm, can lease it but to the committee, so that the ownership fully lies with the village, not with any private person. So accordingly, when we got these, somewhere we got the farmlands, of course, where which was not possible to use. So we switched over to look at old houses wherever they could be renovated. Now the main problem, when community faces in any project is funding, and if you don't get involved in funding, everything takes a while to start, and that brings in the gaps, and people start losing interest. So once you start the mobilization work, it is very important that there is no funding issue. So for us, what we try to do is, at least for the first 5 villages, we provided a mix of loan and grant to the community, not making it fully grant, because again, this is a business venture that they were running, not something which is given to them as a gift. So the entire funding was provided to them by us. And if you see the loan which is a percentage loan, which is part of the funding required for the infrastructure building, it was a burden-free loan. So you can see that it is only payable when we are able to send them guests. So the first criteria is that. Second is that the loan is deducted from each guest payment. So it is only related to the payment that we make to the community that this loan is deducted. Otherwise, it is not deducted. And then it has no interest attached, and there's no timeline attached. So for the community to have this loan, a burden-free loan, it was probably easier for them to accept this model and also feel that this is their enterprise. So through these funds that we provided to the community, we tried to focus on traditional architecture. Now the reason is that we also did not want to make one, say, guest house which stands completely apart from all the village houses, because probably that would also not look nice and the ownership also might be difficult. So we use the same architecture, local skills to make a one unit guest house. You can see here on the screen that there is a traditional house, and inside there is a basic comfort level created for the guests to have a comfortable stay. So you can see this is the simple comforts which can be maintained by the community. So not making them luxurious, but making them comfortable to a certain standard. So going back to this slide, I just want to explain further that the one of the challenges which come, when you actually fund a structure, you have trained the community to run it because you have provided all trainings. But one of the challenges comes is how you maintain the standards for a longer time, because in tourism, once they start getting guests and in the village, they need to keep that standard upkeep from the point they start up till the point they are running it. So this has been a role for us, because I feel there are these gaps which I have seen in other projects or any other places where there have been failures for working in the rural areas, because there is not a uniformity in the standards of places. So I think this is one of the key things which we have tried to do, is keep an eye, monitor the standards, and also keep the training process ongoing for the communities, because just once training doesn't help. So you have to keep doing it again and again, maybe in a gap of 2 years or 1 year. So beyond once your structure is ready, this is a policy that is very important for any tourism venture. And I think there can't be a better example to give than COVID, which hit us recently, and everything was closed for over 2 years. Now, if the community is over dependent on tourism, then there will be also issues related to resilience, because one problem is of course resilience. The other problem is also losing the traditional practices of the village. So what we have always tried to do is explain to the community right from the beginning that this is an alternate source of livelihood for you, but tourism can be impacted by various reasons. So we have to make sure that we continue to do other livelihood practices as we were doing. Primarily, for example, it is farming in most of our villages, or it is one community where this is fishing for a coastal village. So whatever they are traditionally doing, they need to continue doing that along with any tourism act. So now the question is that once you have set up this system, how do you actually operationally, how do you make it work? So you see that how this whole process of community building, where we have a committee formed from each household, there is one committee, and then the committee is managing the guest house. Then they are now forming working groups. So what is a working group is basically a maybe a 4-5 members group, which take turns to look after the guests when they are in the village. Now, how does that help? One is that whenever there is a problem in, say, someone's home, it's a very practical thing to come. If there is one person or a family having some local issues, they don't want to participate on a certain day, then there is a choice not to, because the other people will look after the guests. So one big support is that when you are collectively working to do something, you can support each other. And there is no direct responsibility only on few or maybe one or two. The other big benefit is that, in generally in tourism, if you don't have any resources, so people in the lower class of the community who don't have resources to participate will not be able to participate if you are not getting them this kind of structure. Because, I have seen that in many cases in a village, wherever I have visited, even doing some government projects, I've seen that those who have the resources to say build a small place for guests to stay, they are the ones who can certainly engage. But those people who lack resources, they are completely excluded because they don't have resources. So primary aim for any community-based tourism project has to be that the emphasis should be on those who really are in need for that alternate sources of livelihood. And that also is with the community as a partner, not yourself. I quite like the point which Inaji made, that we have to find the solutions from within the community, not giving them any knowledge from our side, but trying to find ways to do that. And wherever we have opened these discussions with the communities at the start, we have seen a very positive response, because they know who the community members are who are in real need of something. They will try to engage them more, but it's just reinforcing that maybe a good idea would be to do that. Now, the other good thing is that, when community starts to work directly, they also start engaging the nearby areas. So you don't want to also just, exclude anybody from around the village. So we have seen examples of communities taking their guests, say, for example, to a weaver's house who doesn't live in the same village, but may live in a close by village. So it is also then expanding the reach to another community. So what I say is that there is a trickle effect of working in one region. When you start working in one village, the villagers are motivated and they start also engaging people from around their villages. So it expands the reach. Whereas this is only possible now because of the engagement with the entire community, that they become, more open. And so in terms of the local purchases, this is what we have observed. I've just put them as points that we have been observing, is that all the local purchases, for example, basic items like vegetables or milk that they need to run the guest house or their own enterprise, they will buy locally. So from within their village, they can buy these things, and then the income is reaching to some of the farmers or people who are looking after livestock. So this also is a way to expand the reach of the work from one small enterprise to the wider community. In the responsibility of the guests, now, if every day in your home you get somebody to stay and come, at some level you will have privacy issues also. So in terms of this community owned structure, the good part is, as I said, that there is good privacy for both the guests and the host, because you are not living in someone's home, but you are living in a separate guest house. So you are being looked after by everybody, but that means that privacy is ensured for you as well as for the community. And in terms of the experience, I had when we always take feedbacks from our guests, and one thing which everyone says in common is this is a privileged experience to be hosted by the village. We are not talking about one or two people, but it's like you are hosted by an entire village, and that feeling itself is a very, very precious feeling for the experience. So it's just few photographs to show you that how these extra activities, are on the bottom. We can see a fisherman trying to catch fish. This is in the southern part of India. There is some choir making, rope making on that lady is doing. So all these activities become part of the trip, not because we have identified this. It's because the community identifies these activities and takes the guests there because they feel that they want to do something which the guests will enjoy doing. So, and this is how they are engaging now. If you see the other picture where they are making a small rug. So this is also in the vicinity of one of our villages. This is another village where they do this, but guests are taken there. So these are the factors which are mainly talked about in terms of the experience, but in terms of what happens when the community is collected, because this is the important thing which happens in the back. First and foremost, what we have seen is that when they are together, they are certainly a better voice for everything that they want to do in the village. They are more organized. They can have differences, but they also find solutions because they always talk about it and discuss it within their community. And you won't believe, but in these 5 villages, when we started working in 2004, now all of these villages are only walkable. So there's no road even now to reach these places. So between the villages, though they were very close by, they never even interacted with each other. So they were still 3, 4, 5 kilometers maybe away from each other, but there was no connectivity between them. And now these 5 villages are so integrated that we have seen them participating in good and bad times in both. All these 5 villages have now started to come together. And that also is a big strength, because you are involving a village, then the feeling of togetherness helps them to find solutions to problems in day-to-day life also. With government schemes and all the schemes and facilities which are available to the villages, both from government as well as private organizations, they are able to get more information, they are more updated because the entire communities are involved and they are also interacting with each other. One major factor which is also quite a critical factor in a community is when you start getting jealousies and misunderstandings, because that happens when you bring in income into a village. If there are separate units, all of them are engaged, but they have competition. Sometimes this competition also can become little negative. So instead of this, when we have a community structure, as I said, it's a shared responsibility. So the chances of jealousies or misunderstandings within the community are far less. So even if there are, they find, as I said, they discuss and find solutions to the problems. In terms of the guests, now what happens, as I said, is that when communities together, they have their own positives. When there is as far as the guest experience is concerned, it is a win-win for them too. The reason is, as I said, that this is like a privilege to be there and part of the entire village. So the guest, when once you become a guest of the village, you can imagine that you are welcomed in each house. You are part of you can participate in different festivals, events in people's homes, and you are always warmly welcomed, as a part of the guest of the village. So this concept also, I think, has played a very important role for us when guests come and repeat that trip. Other than that, privacy, of course, is a major thing within the village, and also safety is also another critical thing, because when you bring a guest, for example, to an area which is not motorable, you can imagine how much convincing it will need for somebody to feel safe, because you are also maybe hours away from main towns or roads. But since you are a part of the village, they ensure that the guest is safe, and if there is any help required, they will certainly contact. So community takes that ownership even of the safety. I think that the concept of community tourism in our experiences have been, that they don't just impact economy. They also impact various other factors like social factors, traditional factors, and most importantly, environmental factors. I will certainly end my presentation by giving you a small example that in one of the sanctuaries where we work, this same area, there was a guide who was trained by us, and he said that earlier, we used to throw stones at birds whenever we would see it as a small child and even at the young teenage. But after getting involved in tourism, getting the guides training, knowing about birds, we actually look and open a book to see which bird this is, to identify which bird this is now. So that mindset change has come even for the environmental, aspects. So currently we are working in 28 villages in India and Nepal and following exactly what we did in the first 5 villages. And for all the work that we have done, we are very encouraged to have been recognized. And, with these few smiling faces on screen, I hope that my point about collective approach in tourism, it reaches everybody who is hearing me. Thank you so much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Madam Manisha, for a very interesting and insightful presentation on the importance of the collective work approach in community-based tourism. Thank you very much. Next, I would like to hand this over to my colleague, Nurul, to wrap up the session. So, Nurul, this is yours.
Thank you, Lert. And again, thank you, Dr. Mang, Dr. Arziana, and Madam Manisha for the enlightening presentations around community-based tourism. Before we move to the question and answer session, we have a few announcements to make. The session recording will be made available on our website, www.responsibleborneo.com/ICRTH2022. E-certificates of attendance will be issued to delegates who complete a post-conference survey. Please find the survey at the same link above, and the survey will be closed after 1 week. For more information about ICRTH 2022 and other conference sessions, please visit our website on www.responsibleborneo.com/ICRTH2022 program. For any queries about ICRTH 2022, please feel free to contact us via email at icrth2022@responsibleborneo.com. So that's all for the announcements. And for now, please join us for a question and answer session.